talk today on Scotland's history of immigration, and particularly the relationship between climatic factors and Scotland's relatively high levels of immigration. Now, my talk today is not one that is really suited to the tourist board flyers that you have before you. So I thought I'd better put a picture there at the start, just to show you that Scotland occasionally is sunny. And I just put in there a picture of Dundee. This is a new DNA museum in Dundee. The first time the DNA has been outside of London, Victoria and Albert. And there it is, right next to Discovery's Scots Discovery ship, which was built to Dundee in 1900 and went on the British National Expedition. There's a bit of sunlight in there, just to show you that while we've heard of Glasgow and Aberdeen, I am coming to you from Scotland's sunniest campus. Aberdeen does have a claim to that, but it also has colder winds and ship halls. Aberdeen just kind of loses out. If you go to Glasgow, it will have rained. It is the law of the land. So I'm going to talk about immigration and Scotland's history of migration. Scotland has been, since the 18th century, behind immigration, right through the 19th century, in European terms, in per capita terms, second only to Ireland in terms of immigration. You can see the net population growth of Scotland right up to 2004. And only in the most recent time, in the most recent decade, is Scotland actually a net gainer from migration. A lot of that's coming from Eastern Europe, Poland in particular, but Scotland has had a tradition of losing its population. We had a chat about Brexit earlier, but before the European Union there was something called the EEC, European Economic Community. Scotland was the only part of the European Economic Community whose population in the 20th century flatlined. The next lowest, I think, was Belgium at about 8% growth in the 20th century. Scotland, the longest time, in the 20th century, was a population of 5 million. My colleague, when we had a debate about the referendum, had 5 million questions to reflect that. Although now Scotland's about 5.2, 5.3 million. It's finally beginning to grow. So it's this history of immigration which is remarkable. And it's remarkable in terms of an economy that was industrialising, an economy that was growing, and a society that was predominantly urban. We know a lot about rural migration, particularly Highland immigration in particular, and we know that part of what we see today in terms of Tamora and 1816, it reflects the fragility of lives. And I remember that fragility was always a word that I was a student. I had a demographic historian, demographer called Michael Anderson. He always talked about fragility, the F word. Fragility. I was at Ted Cowan's funeral, he had a different F word. But the fragility of Scotland is remarkable. And it's part of the reason why I came to the idea that we haven't really factored in the climate and climate change into a history of Scotland. We know particular events are really important. We know the fragility of Highland life, for example. I was interested in extending that climate angle into the urban world, right through into the 1860s and 1870s, with the predominant number of immigrants leaving Scotland were coming from the towns and the cities. We talked about the artwork, the wonderful artwork that we have here as well. Turnham as well, here in 1822, and I ended up with some John Constable clouds scenes at the end, which are really useful for showing how the colour of the sky changed and how artwork captured that. But I want to focus on a particular aspect of why immigration history is so important to Scotland that was left behind. It's the population growth that is so slow. This is intercensal population growth, so population change between each census. And you can see how much Scotland has lagged behind England in terms of population growth. Well, number, more people are leaving England than Scotland, it's not a nation. But per capita terms in Scotland. And you can see this drag. It's like a bathtub when you plug it, the water keeps draining away no matter how much you go into it. And over the 19th century, about 44% on average of Scotland's natural population increase was leaving through immigration. Now, demographers look for explanations for this. I don't want to give you too much data, but you've had a glass of wine. You really don't want to see numbers. But the numbers in the black you don't really need to read. Basically, in terms of the birth rate and the death rate, there's very little difference between England and Scotland. This is from 1861 to 1920. Very little difference between birth rate and death rate. Not so many Scots are marrying. Most spinsters are married women in Scotland than in England. But when they marry, they have, this is the birth rate of the marriage, the number of births is higher in the early years of marriage. Illegitimacy rates are fairly similar. Now this is interesting also because demographers will show you that cultural patterns to courtship and age of marriage are different either side of the border. There's still the case today that some people will ensure that their children are, as they grow up at the borders, will make sure their children are born in the hospital in Edinburgh rather than the borders general over the border. Make sure they have a Scotland on the person. But birth rate, death rate, remarkably similar over this period. Again, where you do see the difference in terms of migration. Net migration and post migration figures are there. And it's roughly about a factor of 2.5 between the two. Difference between the two. So I'm interested in trying to explain that. Move away from kind of classic images as evidence. This is actually an artwork contained at the Capita Art Gallery Museum in New Zealand. This is evidence of 1844. A very idealised view of Scots who are heading off to take their worldly possessions with them. The level of tartan is somewhat remarkable there, as well as the friendly sheep. I'm not sure that's the reason why this particular image is used in New Zealand. It's trying to invite all these farmers to the sheep farmers. But also, I'm interested also in what they're wearing. Not just the fact that it's tartan, but the cloaks are there. There's not a lot of luggage. It's not that interesting, but the boat is there. Now compare that with compare that, say the images between the kind of the croft that's left and then urban Scotland. Because when we think about the climate challenge, and we talked a little bit about Tambora, quite a lot about Tambora, a lot about Tambora. One of the important points from that is the impact on crops. We heard that about food, and lack of food for baking, and lack of wheat. Again, very important, but also in terms of climate change, the impact that climate change had over this 19th century that I'm mainly focused with on air quality in particular. That's something I noticed here in some of the more recent concerns here. Flooding, particularly important, but also air quality. It's a major sort of discussion point around most of the urban centres around the world, for example, about congestion charges for cars, for example. Goodness knows what it costs today to take a car into London. It's more than the cost of many a car because of the congestion charge to stop people from taking in. Because air quality is particularly a sensitive issue for brain development as well as other conditions to do with lungs. And that issues of the lung consumption were the major killers in 19th century Scotland. So I'm looking particularly over this 19th century period, taking it right through into the early part of the 20th century. Again, this is a photograph from the 1920s, a little bit later from my study, but I'm interested in what they're all wearing. So I'm going to tell you that Scotland is cold. I don't know if you've noticed. It's a bit chilly at the best of times. So they're all heavily dressed. Now, of course, they're carrying everything with them. Obvious answer. They've got all the possessions as well with them. But this is probably April that they're leaving in. I'm certainly just intrigued to get a sense of the bustle here of those who boarded the boat to Canada. But here also, those saying goodbye. Oh, the dress rather similarly. I've quite got the overcoats. I've got the three-piece suit, and it's flat cap heaven. So, I don't know if you watched you wouldn't have watched it, Commonwealth Games, but why would you? Why would you? Sorry. Where am I? But they had a feature with flat caps because there was a particular TV show called Peaky Blinders that comes out of Birmingham, and they all featured with flat caps from the 20s and 30s, and it just shows you that there's some historical relevance to that. Anyway, so I'm looking in many ways at the issues of urbanisation. And I'm looking at Scotland, which is the coldest of the four nations. This is data from 1926, rainfall of the British Isles, and it goes back to 1872 as the wettest year in the United Kingdom, Great Britain, and also includes Ireland in this as well. And guess what? You can see all the black areas there on the west coast, the northwest of the Highlands in particular, where you see the heaviest levels of rainfall. If you take the driest period, it's not very clear, I'm afraid, but it's really just to show you the driest year on record there. Again, you see it's the same area as Wales, in particular the west coast of Ireland. That west coast is particularly where you get the rainfall. And if you look at some of the government inquiries that investigated the issues of emigration, even back to the writings of Malthus and his work with the 1821 Royal Commission into Emigration, we talk about the impact of climate change. And that is evidence that's also picked up in the two statistical accounts of Scotland in the 1790s and the 1840s. They all refer to the nature of the climate, what has happened, are people leaving now, is rainfall greater than it has been, what's the levels of frost. So that information is gathered in those statistical accounts. More so, particularly in the 1840s, they're following in a new disciplinary approach of meteorology, which really comes out from the 1820s through the Royal Society of Edinburgh, in Scotland's case, and then in the 1850s with the Scottish Meteorological Society in 1855. But I'm showing the climatic challenge there, and I know we've all just gone through Germany as well, just has record temperatures. Am I thinking here? Yeah, Scotland and England also had record temperatures in the recent summer. Going back to the 1870s, you can find the coldest recorded temperature in Scotland on over 300 occasions. The warmest temperature in the UK only on 20 occasions. Scotland is the colder of the four nations. And it has an impact also on excess winter mortality. There are colder places on this earth than Scotland. But Scotland, Ireland as well, have what we call excess winter mortality. Higher deaths than we should get given the level of temperature. And often that's back to issues of dampness, poor quality housing, issues of lack of central heating, for example. It's interesting that one of the first things the Scottish executive in those days, when we first got to Scottish Parliament in 1999, one of the first bits of legislation was to promote insulation for people who are retired. So the realisation that the quality of Scotland's housing has been poor for so many years. And that reflects some of the data that I'm also showing you from earlier in the century. So here we have Scotland's temperature. Sorry, it's in Fahrenheit. I use Celsius in comparison. So about 8 degrees, going up to about 8.5. So you can see global warming, just about. Scotland's temperature, this is variation. This is the longest run of data that we have. It's for Edinburgh, a little gap. We're in Fairland, which is relatively near, fine. too far. I'm from Kirkcaldy, which is an arch rival of Dunfermline, so I have trouble acknowledging its existence. But it's there. And so this is Scottish temperature. And actually, if you take, I've stopped here in 1896, but if you, the data that also goes from the 1910s and 1920s shows a dramatic rise in the rate of temperature increase. We've got 1816 here. Yeah, the peak sense here of the cold that's there that happens after the rush. So we've got a single run of data from 1764. We've also got wind data, so I see some of that as well in the images there at the back. We have over 200 years of continuous gale data. It doesn't mean it's gales for 200 years. Just the data goes back 200 years. And in particular, it shows the impact of volcanic action on the number of windy days that we have. So for example, in the 2 years after Tambora, on average it should be 30 gales a year in Scotland. There were 50, 60, double 2 years and 4 years. So gale data is another way of working out the impact of climatic events such as Tambora. And also there, in terms of, I'll give you some data here to show you the coldest decades, 1811 to 1820, particularly cold. Also, there's issues of Highland emigration here, particularly of America in the 1760s and 1770s. Sam Johnson notices that's a particular period where there's people leaving in bigger numbers than happening before off to America. Again, we can see the average there, 1790, the average there is 6.8 Fahrenheit or 8.2 in centigrade as well. And it's a range, it's not an enormous range, it's ranging from 7.8 to 8.6 degrees centigrade. It's not an enormous range. And that also interested me, because why would so many Scots go to countries where temperature extreme was greater? I lived in Canada for 9 years. That's 2 seasons. In school or blazing sunshine. Just in between. Really doesn't. And much more extreme climates than we have in Scotland. Yet, they were persuaded, many of these migrants were persuaded by, I'll show you in a moment, persuaded by the climate in other countries. So I'm trying to add the climatic factor into immigration. We know people are going for jobs. We know they go when there's assistance, either public or private. The gold rush, these are all periods that really attract greater numbers. We also know that people go after fragility breaks down, after illness takes over, after, we know that there's a Highland migration that is done in steps. Highland, you go to Perth or to Dundee, into Edinburgh or Glasgow, and then off to Greenland in the boat. So no step migration goes on. So, this data that I used for Edinburgh was brought together by this guy, R.C. Mossman, Robert Mossman, and of Antarctic. He served in Scotia, the Antarctic expedition in 1984. He was up to Argentina for a while, and he collated a lot of information, including a lot of data on climatic events in Scotland. So really 3 classic articles that I produced for the Transactions of the Royal Society of Edinburgh in the end of the 19th, early 20th century that are really useful. This is their attempt, pictures there, so the Ben Nevis Observatory in Scotland, built by private funds in 1885. It's not there any longer. Now you get the funicular, you get a little train that will take you up. But they used to try and self-fund it by encouraging you to pay money to walk up Ben Nevis, which is Scotland's highest point, by the way. So again, it's a good point. But the reason for showing you here is a change in there's now a discipline here. The Met Office is opened in London, in the Board of Trade in London in 1854. Next year, Scotland gets its own Scottish Met Society, Meteorological Society. But again, classic kind of argument about Scotland, it would not be funded. It's not funded by the Royal Society of London, not funded by government, funded by private subscription, to give Scotland information that they wanted to understand agricultural change, regional change, but also, as I'm going to show you, in terms of the link to the health and welfare of the population. This is the kind of data they came up with. 1855 is also, well, you budding genealogists, is also when the Register General for Scotland is set up. We have official birth, death, and marriage statistics gathered in Scotland. The first statistician of that particular body was a guy called James Stark. And James Stark was really interested in the impact of temperature on mortality in Scotland. Guess what? More people died when it was cold. And this was interesting also because it contrasted it with various parts of empire, the British Empire, where they'd still, the conclusion was always the impact of heat. There's a lot of evidence there on the British Army and the impact of heat. Also to do with close living, so we looked at the air quality in barracks, for example, and that impacted on social health. So we get this period as this overlap. The first time we're getting official statistics of birth, death, and marriage, Register General, we also have a statistician who believes in meteorological determinism, that there is an impact of climate on the health of the people. But there was a direct link. And he spent his time trying to prove it, just as the first, Robert Fitzroy, the first meteorologist in London, also tried to prove there was a rationale. This was a new scientific discipline. It didn't have the credibility of other disciplines, of astronomy, from which it was originated. So they tried, these practitioners tried to produce a way of use value, utilitarian value. And this idea of link to mortality was one that they focused on. And again, it gives you a sense of Scotland. So much do we focus on Highland migration. Actually, if you want to stay alive, you're better staying in the crops, you're better staying in Highland Scotland than moving to the towns. The town areas, the urban areas of Scotland were always where the greatest death rate would be found. Particularly if you're male, particularly if you're under 5. Those were the death rates that were the highest. So there's any surprise that Scotland lost so many people from the towns, particularly after the 1860s with urban migration was really moved on. And just to show you that Scotland is an incredibly urban nation, this is showing population increase in towns over 5,000, but in normal settlements, just 5,000. But you see here, decade by decade, how many more people are living in the towns. And arguably, by the 1870s, about 80% of Scotland is living in striking distance of Edinburgh and Glasgow. That idea of conurbation, the term that Patrick Geddes coined, connected urban to Edinburgh and Glasgow, is reflected in this. Well, the towns are important. Also levels overcrowding. Scotland was an incredibly urban nation. Visit England, you'll find, particularly rural and regional England, you'll find a predominant of, describe them as kind of smaller houses, back-to-back houses. Again, cultural reference that you won't get if you watch Coronation Street. Good, you get that. Perfect. Anyway, it's a kind of predominant working class housing, but if you go to Edinburgh, Glasgow, Dundee, you'll see tenements, you'll see tall buildings, and levels of overcrowding. So England had bad housing, just as Scotland did, but the level of overcrowding in Scotland was always higher, even by 1904. And this is data that covers the artisan class. This is not the poorest. This is not slum housing. This is not poor. This is the lower middle, well, skilled working class, artisans, maybe bringing in some of the lower middle class. And you can see that over 53% of Scots in this particular survey are living in 2 rooms per household. And that got me interested again in the way that climate has an impact. chatting earlier about buildings. Thomas Connelly is a building named after him at Dundee University, Professor of Chemistry at Dundee and Aberdeen. Died tragically young, but he investigated air quality in Dundee and Perth. He also investigated air quality underneath the Houses of Parliament, because he thought our parliamentarians are dying with a poor air quality. His research actually found it was an awful lot better in the sewers underneath Parliament than it was in Dundee and Perth. Here he is with John Scott Haldane there on the right, investigating Dundee sewer. And I was so delighted to get this picture. How could you ever be so pleased to get a picture of a sewer? I was. But what is interesting about their work was it was hinting at the level of air quality and how the death rate doubles in 1 and 2 bedrooms housing compared to 4 bedroom housing. So the death rate is increased, not from being in an urban environment. And Dundee as well. Other work by social reformer William Walker also shows that the impact, particularly on antenatal care, is very, very poor in these urban areas. So again, so they look at air quality and they look at the way that normally in this period you think wonderful wind, clear away the disease, get rid of the miasmas, but they're actually showing that the housing is so close together that air doesn't actually blow away bring freshness, actually just stirs up dust and dirt. And they looked at the level of people's lungs, what they were actually slowing down. Similar thing, research has been done by some trade unionists on weavers, for example, and sewers in terms of the data. This is showing you in terms of air quality in Dundee. So this is your control group, those with 4 rooms of 1, 4 rooms or above, and then 2 rooms or 1 room housing shows you how little space there was, but then amount of carbonic acid and organic matter there is. Actually, some of the best air quality data we've got is by Lord Kelvin, who did it for London. Didn't do it for Glasgow, but he went to the Isle of Arran. He had a holiday home and measured the air quality in Arran and found the effects of the air coming from Glasgow over the west coast to Arran. And recorded the data there, which just shows you the prevailing. But this shows you what we're believing and what they believe in this kingdom. So, that's a climatic reason to leave. Were they aware of it? If you had any sense, you would move to the towns. But who read the government's blue books? Who read the government's statistics? There is one comment I've come across about how migrants being pushed into the jobs that would have a greater impact on their health, which is interesting. But there's also the data from the immigrant guides that sold better quality of life overseas based on particular air quality. There's some lovely examples from New Zealand where elderly migrants are getting the hilarity of youth returned because they've moved out. Salubrious, how that translates. A salubrious environment is exactly the word that we use all the time to describe. What is different? This is not going off to the Mediterranean to enjoy the spas of Italy or of Austria, for example. And there's, Marx was going to enjoy a nice spa. Or Walter Scott, for example, when he was called back by his third, fourth stroke, was on a Mediterranean tour at the time when he came back after to die. It was fascinating to read about all the support he got to travel around the Mediterranean for his health. This is not travelling for a short-term cure. This is an argument about immigration for the long-term health of the family. And in the 1860s, the medical climatological Society, part of the Royal Society of Edinburgh, was formed, which looked at the data, looked to try and recommend where to go for Scots to avoid darkness. So everything guides towards the practical information, but they also give lots of accounts about how wonderful the weather is in these different places. And rival accounts as well. The Canadians would say, why on earth would you go to Australia? You're going to die, it's too damn hot. Fair-skinned Gales will never survive the Australian summer. Australians, of course, say, why on earth would you go to Canada? You'll just die in that winter. Why on earth would you? And then there are other arguments. Because the weather is so much better, you don't need to build such a strong house that you would do in Scotland. You don't need a brick-built house with a tilted roof. You can build something much more cheaply because the weather is less harsh. And that kind of data is around all these evergreen lines as well. So there's a kind of literary approach as well, both in terms of practical government-issued data, but also guides sent back home. Anyone who's been abroad thinks, I have a literary idea, I should write about this, publish it in newspapers, and they'll tell stories about the wonderful climate. And then, of course, the adverts came as well. This is a little data, it comes from the 1870s, it's the opening up Canada West. And this was also to try and sell the image. Again, people are going for land, the cost of land, they're looking, they're interested in the price of meat, how far from the market, all that kind of practical information is there. But they're also getting data about the climate they're moving to. As a kind of test, I looked at some of the testimony at of recent migrants into both Canada and into the US. It's an oral history taken in the 1920s. And the first thing people mention is the weather. Whether it's hot or whether it's cold. It's the first thing natural thing. But they talk about that. I've a lovely, from my former doctoral students, Caroline Cable, who's been working in Canada. She has a wonderful example about some nuns who were sent out from Glasgow to go off to Canada, up to Quebec. And no one told them it would be cold, so they never turned up with any winter coats. If you told them what the weather was like, would you go? But otherwise, adverbs are a big part of that as well in terms of looking at that. So I've looked at a range of these kind of immigrant guides, I'll say both factual issues, but also more literary. Ones that describe the weather. John Galt, for example, who founded Guelph when I was working in Canada. Some of his accounts. He only worked for the Canada Company for a short period, but otherwise he wrote a lot that was really boosterism. He wrote under the name Bandana to promote immigration. He actually promoted the middle classes to go out. The big issue was, should the poor be funded or subsidised to immigrate? There was John Galt, the novelist, was arguing, no, get the middle classes out there, we'll develop the economies, and then all the trade would then flow between Canada and Scotland. So a different approach. But also this kind of boosterism, this was a kind of competition that was going on, particularly once Australia, after the 1840s, became an important destination. And Australia, if you're wondering to know, is where most Scots emigrate to today. It's the most popular destination for Scots. In the 19th century, by America, also many Scots will actually go to Canada and then travel themselves across Lake Ontario to get themselves into America. So, lots of images. Are you looking to do this? Other than a little bit of data, I thought, why not let's compare the average temperature with the number of migrants? Is there a correlation there? Give it a go. Give it a go, see what's there. This is for 1854 to 62, looking at a run of data. And the correlation of about 0.64, which is the Scottish data. Well, the English data is only about 0.21. So much less of a correlation or association between temperature change and immigration in Scotland than there is. So I'm much more interested in looking at the kind of the way that knowledge was used, both as a scientific discipline that fed into government inquiries about immigration, particularly how climate was used more and more from the 1850s as an argument to support immigration. But I thought also have a look at data. And just got 3 graphs just to finish off here. which may or may be interesting, may mean nothing. So it's a little bit vague here on the screen. But what this is to look at temperature deviation from the mean. So this is just 1825 to 1850, and I've charted over this 25-year period what years showed greatest deviation from the mean temperature that we expect over the period. When does it rise? And what you tend to find here is this is the yellow, and the annual sailings there are there in the faint and the blue. And there's a bit of a match going on here. As we see annual sailings going up just when there is years of greater variation. As the spikes are going up, then it's time years. One can postulate that there's a kind of delay going on here, that when there is a period of, in Scotland's term, extreme variation between movement from the mean year and from the norm, then that could lead to periods of greater sailing. I'm just putting this out there. I'm not convinced by this data myself, but I'm putting it out there. Now here's another one. Emigrant sailing between years where there's the greatest difference between the hottest and the coldest month. So again, yellow is showing you the temperature difference, and here again the annual sailings are there in the blue. And this is showing you here again that the sea wind, there's the peak is there. The peak starts to go down just after the level of variation is at least. So what you look there is for when there's less variation, what happens afterwards. And again, you can see here, this is where it's at its least, and therefore the sailings go down again. Possible? But this is some of the data that Boston and others were looking at in the 19th century. They want to get beyond just the average to see if there were particular variations that you could see. So looking at gale data, for example, looking at rainfall, looking at the regional spread of rainfall. These are all possible. One thing I found when doing this work is meteorologists collect a lot of data. I kind of thought, oh, that's pretty yearly averages, that's good. When we started getting to hourly data, I thought, this is the right job for me. But emigrant sailings, in terms of difference between hottest and coldest, and there's some useful work that's there. And my final one here is just to show you an average. This is over a longer period. This is 1853 to 1896. And again, this one actually shows more of an alignment between temperature variation and number of sailings. I put it out there because I know each of those sailings is going to be impacted much more effectively by cost, availability of jobs, is there any funding, is there a gold rush going on? That's all going to have an impact. But it helps just frame a climatic argument going there. Ravenstein, who did some of the analysis in the 1881 census on migration, Ravenstein's laws of migration, include climate as one of the further inducements. If you read his work on emigration, it's really interesting. He's trying to find are there set laws. In the same way the Scottish Meteorological Society is looking for set laws on climate. They want a Newton of meteorology to give them set laws. The laws of storms were published in the 1830s. They're looking to understand patterns. Admiral Maury, for example, from America, from America, became a great meteorologist in the US, as a great pathfinder of the seas, finding pathways through the oceans, all looking for regular patterns. So I thought I'd come in there. But I better finish with something just to cheer you up if you don't come to Edinburgh. This is about. Stop raining. I did change on the verse to say it's actually stopped being sunny now. I realised where I was coming to. But this is a newspaper in New Zealand about the deal with Scotland. But really, there's no climate against them. Edinburgh, I can't even make this out. I'm sorry, Edinburgh. Spent many happy years there. But grey houses, grey people. Like Aberdeen, it's never grey in Aberdeen, of course. It's always silver. But interesting, this kind of cultural reflection that again I mentioned John Constable applied study, which you can see down in London, really impressive. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
As a literary historian, of course, I really appreciate the work you're doing as historian, just to tell us more historical growth. We do have time for one or two questions, and since you're finishing on that note on Edinburgh 9 months of winter, 3 months of that, can I just point out that all these leaflets have been sent to us from the Scottish Government, so do take them home as an antidote.
So listen to the Scottish Government, don't listen to me.
Go to Scotland. Okay. First question.
I wanted to ask you actually why. Sorry, let's take this off. Already wanted to ask you when you were showing the data on comparing England, Wales versus Scotland.
Yeah.
Because when you look at the rain chart, you see that Wales is getting almost as wet as Scotland and the western coast of Ireland as well, which is because of the Atlantic, of course, pushing in. And so my question would be, how does Scotland compare to Wales and areas of Ireland?
Yeah, I think the difference with Scotland is high land. It's literally it's about the temperature difference about I think it's about 1 to 2 degrees between east and west. But also there's the issue of height. The higher you go, so above sea level, then it gets colder and the level of frost is higher. So Scotland has more high land than Wales, but you're right. There are years where England is absolutely the wettest place. Wales, of course, Ireland and West Coast.
In terms of emigration, we had a lot of Welsh people leaving as well, wouldn't we?
Yeah, the Welsh. Welsh migration is often into England, or it's into the south of the country as well. So actually, the year 1921. 1911, 1921, 1930 were the biggest drop in Scotland's population. Scotland's population lost 110% of its natural increase down in 1 decade, and that's because we all went to England. We all went to England in the 1920 decade. So it'd be interesting to put, I haven't gone that far to look at the impact of climate on Wales and to the same extent in England, other than doing that brief correlation to show that it wasn't that bit of the data didn't show it to be such a strong issue. But England as well is still getting the same kind of evident books. These are being sold in Glasgow, as are being sold in Liverpool, as are being sold in London and passed around. So it's getting a lot of the same kinds of information. The sunny images of Canada are being projected off to England as much as Scotland. This is, I just wanted to see this as one of the further inducements, the other reasons that contextualize. Also this idea about why so many Scots were going to areas that effectively were more extreme, but we're not necessarily told that. There's enough data there about the lies people were told.
Thank you.
Any other comment or question? Yes, please.
If I may slightly confused question. So I was wondering how you put that in context with, I guess, other appreciable factors of immigration, like the home clearances, and you mentioned all those places that they went to, and obviously those are part of the British colonies, and you have the whole, I guess, extraction economy in Scotland as well, that's fueling the empire, and how that stands in contrast, that stands in the context of people emigrating because of climate, but also actively contributing to climate change by immigration and by colonialism. And by, the extraction economy, especially in sterling, and
yeah, okay.
Sorry,
this is a long question. I think you need to have a glass of wine.
I think that's an absolutely brilliant question that needs a book. Needs a monograph on that, because I think that absolutely is an interesting, particularly as you say, the movement to the extraction economy, because that's really important. Particularly Scots going up to South Africa, for example, we've got predominantly there in terms of miners, but also the earlier history of plantations as well, which we know that there's increasingly alternative accounts, new accounts, revisions coming around. So yeah, I think it's a brilliant project. I'm encouraged to do that. It's really big, important question.
Yes, pick up a voucher for the wine. Yes, but before you do, can I just thank you once again for and this is the Scotland evening, on Thursday we have the Ireland evening, and we're following up with a poetry reading from Wayne Price and Ian Delright from University of Mainz, all at the University of Mainz, and Wayne from the University of Aberdeen, and that is going to happen in about 40 minutes, so you have enough time to visit the food truck and to pick up your free drink. And I must say, this is kindly sponsored by the Scottish Government. Here you go, so that's going. And if you have any more questions, then you would take some time. This will be open tonight, and it will also be open exhibition tomorrow and on Thursday. We still haven't got anybody from Friday, but tomorrow and Thursday you can just watch this and talk to my colleagues about this. So at 8:30 in Court 1, Ian and Wayne are going to present their latest writing. Thanks ever so much.